Hello everyone, welcome to my 1cc and commentary of Demonizer Hard Mode, a game I have been a fan of ever since it came out, and that was a few years ago at this point, and I think I gave it Shmup of the year that it came out, which is really cool. If you haven't checked it out, I definitely recommend it. And also, fun little fact is if you pick it up on itch.io, you actually can get the Steam version included with it, so that's a win-win. Buy it on itch.io, the developer gets more money, and also you get the Steam code and you get two versions of the game. So I think it's a hard deal to pass up on. So Demonizer, this is a really overlooked shmup in my opinion. I know Jamers made a video about it, shout outs to that, and then also my review, but outside of those two bits of content, poor Demonizer has been overlooked quite a bit. And I remember reading not too long ago a blog post by the developer where it sounded like he felt a little discouraged from the lack of interest in the game outside of, a few people here and there. And so I do want to say, if this looks at all good to you, definitely worth checking it out. It's got a lot of content, really well made, really well put together. I have like 15 hours of gameplay in the game already, and that's just between the normal mode and hard mode clears, and I can see myself continuing to play for the Demonizer clear. So for those who do not know, there was a bit of DLC recently that included a new character, Snow. But the character you see me playing here is Amy. And Amy is my favorite character in the game, and I'll probably just continue to play Amy all the time. And the reason why is Amy is possibly one of my favorite shmup characters of all time, gameplay-wise. Amy is like all my favorite ships put together. So she's got a Ketsui lock-on concentrated shot. Then when you're doing your rapid shot, it's homing Garegga style rapid. So that's really awesome. Her movement speed is great. Her hitbox is small. And then the cherry on top is that her bomb is like Gain's bomb from Battle Garegga, but with more invulnerability. So it's like all my favorite ships smashed together. The only real improvement I could see is ever so slightly increasing her movement speed, but that might be a bit of a turnoff for some players. But other than that, I mean, one of my favorite ships in shmup history. And I really like the character design too. Like, I love demons and angels and RPG-ish looking shmups. That's a bit of a soft spot for me. So all of these elements really come together in my palette of shmup taste to put Demonizer on my list of one of my favorite indie shmups in the past few years. Absolutely. Some notes about Demonizer, if you're playing it for the first time, is that its game design is pretty unique, and if you're not quite prepared for it, you might have some troubles. I accidentally lost my auto bomb there. Otherwise, I would have bombed that thing and got I think you get like a point upgrade or something. Also, a quick fun fact is this is a hard mode clear, which is actually hard. It's not an easy clear to get. I had to sit and do stage practice and stuff, and the game also has a really excellent training mode. The only criticism I could possibly level towards the training mode is adding in like mid checkpoints, because there were some checkpoints like the last stage opening area where I would have liked one more checkpoint in between the two. Other than that, I can't really fault the practice mode. It is one of the best practice modes in an indie shmup in a very long time. It's got it all. But anyway, what I was saying is, I believe there are actually only 3 hard mode clears on the leaderboard with Amy. So I'm the third one. I have third place on the leaderboard, right behind Rizzardi. I feel like I'm a little bit torn whether if I want to continue for the Demonizer clear, or if I want to try and get the top score in the hard mode. I might go for that. That would be pretty cool to get the world record of Demonizer in hard mode, because I don't have any shmup world records. I could see myself getting it. So you might see me playing more Demonizer and going for a world record in the game in the future. Fun little bit of info here is, you see that door you're flying over? There is a glitch in medium difficulty mode where the layering of the door is too low. Or too high? Too low? I can't remember how. I think it's too high, actually. So that it like goes over your shot sprite. The door like hovers over them. That's only in the medium difficulty though, not in the hard difficulty. So the developer must be playing a lot of hard mode because that glitch is not in hard mode, but it's in medium mode. It's just a visual glitch, and I'm sure me pointing it out, he'll probably patch it, but just thought it'd be fun to kind of point that out. But I want to talk about this game's design because it's pretty unique. So the way it works, it's like reverse Touhou. It's like, not anti-Touhou. It's like a mirror image of Touhou's level design, where it's very similar, but at the same time, the way Touhou works, level design-wise, is everything is flying. So there is no concept of grounded enemies in Touhou for the most part. They're extremely rare. Almost every enemy in Touhou is flying in the air. In Demonizer, it's like reversed. Almost every single enemy is on the ground. There are a few air enemies, but almost every single enemy is on the ground. And that adds to some really interesting level design choices. Like this boss right here, he's on the ground. Just, for one, you can fly over the enemies almost all the time. So keep that in mind, because if you're used to playing like Touhou, and you get into certain sections of the game, you're gonna think, holy hell, this game is really unfair. Then you realize, oh wait, I can fly over and around things. So that's important to keep in mind. Another thing about this game's level design, which is interesting, and it's hard to know how I feel about it, is how low on the screen enemies will attack you and how low on the screen they will go. So in shmups, it's very typical, like if you play a cave game or Touhou, I think, that enemies will stop attacking you once they hit the bottom third of the screen, because it's a nightmare when they do that usually. However, in this game, because I think they are grounded enemies, he does not really introduce that until like the very last bit of the screen. So they'll attack you much lower on the screen than other shmups. And the reason why I can't say this is an outright flaw, and a lot of shmups I'd say this is an outright mistake, but the reason why I can't necessarily say it's an outright mistake in Demonizer is because everything's grounded. So you can fly over them and you can deal with them because they're on the ground. But it's just very interesting. So that's a level design aspect of the game that if you're not prepared for, you're going to get very frustrated because you're not used to it, right? But once you're used to it and you realize, okay, because there are some shmups that are just straight up busted because the enemies attack you really low on the screen. Like Jamestown, for example, is like this. But the difference between Demonizer and Jamestown is that Demonizer, it's clear that the developer is aware of this. If not all else, because people would complain about it to him directly and he listens to us, but also because everything's on the ground, and then the air enemies don't tend to do that. So only the grounded, and there's certain grounded enemies who will do it, but not everyone does it. So you can tell that there was some dev awareness in this process. So I just want to make that a point for everyone picking up the game. That way you're not getting frustrated and surprised by it. That aside though, I really love this game's level design. It just stands out as very unique and very well placed and well thought out, and he's doing things that don't happen all that often in shmups, and then you think like, whoa, this is a cool idea, right? But because it's such a small indie release, I think, it's not quite getting the recognition that it would if other games in the genre were doing stuff like this. That being said, shmups never get recognition anyway, so that's not necessarily the biggest injustice in the world, considering like even the greatest shmups of all time are mostly overlooked. But just for my fellow shmup fans, that's something to keep in mind. For example, he has this cool cover system for the enemies where they'll run and like hide behind shit, but it has a little like spark that shows, okay, oh, here they are, they're hiding. But so you have to like time when they pop out. It's almost like a action game or something. I kind of like that. I think it's a fun mechanic. He does a lot of stuff like that, and he has like little booby traps he puts in that you would see in like a horizontal shmup, but here they are in a vertical shmup. The heavy use of grounded enemies, that's unique. And I think part of this, a little insider baseball, is my theory as to why there are so many grounded enemies is because just reading the dev logs and everything, he was saying he's basically like me, where he's much more of a competent designer and programmer, but he's not an artist. That's myself. So he needed to use a lot of pre-made sprites or readily available cheap sprites, right? And what's funny, I've been in the same... I can sympathize with all this because I'm in the exact same boat. That's why it's kind of funny. And so the solution that I think both of us came to independently of one another, because I was working on House of Bullets alphas before Demonizer came out. Like the way it was putting it together, everything. I've been working on alphas of it forever. But my plan was what Demonizer did. So it was kind of funny when I saw Demonizer, I was like, holy shit, he's doing the same stuff that I'm doing. But the point is that because there was a lack of, like, shmup made sprites don't really exist. Like, free to use shmup sprites that are recognizably shmup and good. Like, for example, sprites you would get in like a cave game or a Rising game. They don't exist because the genre isn't big enough and the fan base isn't big enough to make that happen. So instead, what he did and what I did at House of Bullets is you're taking RPG sprites, because RPGs are a massive genre, especially for free artistic assets. You can get so many free assets for RPG games, especially with RPG Maker and all that sort of stuff out there, open source RPG assets, all of that exists. So it's excellent if you're trying to come up with a visual design of your shmup. Using RPG assets is a very strong way to go. That's what I do with House of Bullets. But getting back to the original point, the issue is that in RPGs, everything is on the ground, right? All the enemies are ground enemies. You can get like a bat here or there, maybe a dragon. But for the most part, your enemies are on the ground. So I think this is one reason why there are so many grounded enemies in the game. It's just this is my guess, it's a product of the circumstances of that. He has no real assets to work with that would be like ships and flying things that much. So he needs to work with grounded enemies. So I think that's the reason for it. But the cool part is he makes it work. He comes up with these new mechanics, like them hiding under stuff. He makes the level design sort of fit the mold where they're like running underneath you, and just the bullet patterns and everything. I think it's really, really clever, because my solution to it in House of Bullets is a little bit different. It's more jank, which is, okay, yes, they're grounded enemies, but I'm just going to make the visuals kind of funky and surreal enough that you sort of accept that grounded enemies are walking in the air. They're like Luke Skywalker. They're just walking on clouds. So that was my way to go about it, where I do have grounded enemies and I do have flying enemies, and it's really just down to perspective to tell who's in the air and who's on the ground. Touhou did the opposite thing, where Touhou didn't really know how to work in grounded enemies either, so they just say, okay, no grounded enemies. So I am trying to split hairs between the two. The real solution is obviously cave style. Cave is the master of this. Cave is the best at this, in my opinion, where they mix in air and ground enemies. Not only do they mix them in gameplay wise, but they mix them in visually very well. They put like little silos for tanks to park on and like little carrier ships or whatever they need. They justify the grounded enemies being in some very odd places visually. And so you never sit and think like, wait, why is there a tank flying on this, thing here? It doesn't matter. Visually, it makes sense. That's all that matters. So this is one of those boss fights that once you expand your mind a little bit, it's not too bad. But at first, you're going to get wrecked by it. Because initially, when you start fighting the boss, you think, oh, okay, I'll fight that like a traditional boss where you hang back and you try and go around it. Well, that boss is a boss where you actually want to start moving forward and around things. And the reason why I picked up on that is because I play a lot of Ketsui. And in Ketsui, there's bosses and enemies like that because of the lock-on system. So that one, I was like, oh shit, this is like a Ketsui boss. So again, this is what I'm talking about with Demonizer that I think gets really overlooked, is that the guy is paying a lot of attention to his mechanics and his design, level design, and he's making them fit together. He's like, okay, we have a Ketsui lock-on mechanic here. Let's make the boss fights reflect this. So a lot of the boss fights, the lock-on system is balanced around the boss fight, or the boss fights bounce around the lock-on system, chicken the egg type thing, but they work together. This is an interesting section where those cemeteries blow up and graves blow up, and then these exploding skeletons come out of it. But if you hang back on the screen, they don't blow up. they blow up, but like all at once, and it's really ugly. So you want to move head forward. This is a fun boss fight. So there's a little bit of an RNG element here where she goes into cover, and it's not a set pattern. It's random. So you have to just kind of guess where she's going to pop out. And obviously you want to guess so that you can point blank her. But once she releases those green bullets, you need to, I would recommend letting go of your point blank and just macroing around, because they have this insanely nasty side curve on them that's very hard to dodge. Now here we go, bomb. So a lot of the boss strats in this game revolve around bombing and like strategic bombing, like in Garegga. That's what's fun about it. This would be a great game actually to do a bombing tutorial on, because it's one of those games that really work the bombing into the system. I need to get a little bit more familiar with the scoring system of the game, because for right now my scoring strategy is just, you know, kill lots of enemies, don't die, and save your lives because you cash them out or you get like bonuses for not dying. But I think there's like a greater chaining system and stuff I need to investigate, which I will if I go for the world record in the game. But anyway, this section here is one of the hardest sections in the game, if not the hardest section. You have to really route this out in hard mode. In normal mode, you can kind of get away with it, but hard mode, you really got to route it out, because you basically need to plan out your bombs, and the section gives you the resources to use bombs, even if you aren't coming into the stage with bombs. Again, good level design, giving you the resources that it wants you to use. This bit here, you want to delay the bomb as long as you can. You kind of macroing around. Those patterns where they drop the fire out the window, that is nasty. Those are nasty. And the way you got to deal with them with just like a really good... the dodging in this section. This is that section you can chain die right here. This boss right here, this mid boss, this may look simple. That bomb and kill was what got me the clear, because the way that section works is if you miss that point blank bomb, so if you come into him without a bomb, oh boy, you're in for a rough time. But even if you have one, he kind of eats your bomb, so you have to point blank bomb him and then use the invulnerability of the bomb activation, even if the bomb's not there, to point blank him. And it's actually really precise and tricky. And if you don't, he goes into these rage modes and he can just chain kill you really badly. So if you miss that bomb setup that I did there, you could easily take 2 or 3 deaths. And the thing about Demonizer to keep in mind when you're going for the 1cc is that the chain deaths in this game are nasty. This game can get really nasty with chain death. I was reading Jamer's commentary. He got a demonic clear, and he was basically saying in one section or another, one of these later sections, that if you die here, the chain deaths will overwhelm you and game over. So don't die here, especially in the later stages, because you power down and you don't fully restock your bombs either. And the higher your difficulty mode, I believe the less bombs you get. This section here looks scary, but there's these red heart items, I should have explained this earlier, that give you a second or two of invulnerability. So in certain sections, if you can chain them together, you're just like fully invulnerable. And that section there, when I was first going for my 1cc, I think if you look at my original video, I was bombing there because that section's terrifying, because I didn't recognize that I'd be fully invulnerable with the heart items, because it's really there to beef you up. So that was an incredibly good fight. That's another one of those fights where if you mess it up, it can chain death really badly, because she's cheap as hell, because she gets really low on the screen and shoots you in the face. And she's really sneaky. So here we go. Final boss. This fight here is a lot of fun. One of my favorite final boss fights in a long time. It's very unique, but not strange, if you know what I mean. So what he does is he drops all these Touhou style bullets from the sword, then he'll swing it, and there's a rhythm to it, and when he swings it, he does that spread shot there, and you gotta sneak between the spread shot. But what makes it fun is he's kind of hibachi-like, because he's like swinging around randomly, and then this bit here, he starts planting and doing these beams. When you first fight this boss, especially if you just go right into hard mode, you are gonna get absolutely wrecked, because bombs don't really do a whole lot to him. You have to, and if you get chain death and you depower, The fight takes longer and longer and longer the more you die because you lose and lose less and less power. So it's one of those fights, like many fights in shmups, where momentum is huge. If you come into it fully powered up and just carry that fully power up throughout the fight, it goes well. Here we go, TLB time. I'm perfectly fine here because there's a bomb strat on the TLB where the TLB gives you bombs, and if you bomb correctly, you can kind of like refill your bombs with bomb. It's very hard to do with one extend with Amy, but it is possible. But I had plenty of extends there, so I wasn't worried. That the TLB is only scary if you go into it with like 1 life and no bombs. Then it's absolutely terrifying. But if you come into it with at least some bombs and an extend or 2, you can just cheese it out and be totally fine. The fun part, the interesting part about the boss fights in this game is that they fluctuate between you can cheese them out with bomb strats, but also if you don't, but if you mess up, you get absolutely wrecked. And also if you try to fight them without using bombs, which I would assume might play into scoring to some degree, the boss fights are actually really hard, but in a fun way. So I'm very much looking forward to the next game Iori Bradford, that's the developer, does. I love Demonizer. I'm probably one of the biggest Demonizer fans out there. I can't recommend it enough. It's a ton of fun. It has easy mode, normal mode, hard mode, demonic mode. It has some extra stuff, and then it has an amazing stage select. I love the art style. I like the soundtrack. I love the visual theming of it. The level design is excellent. It's one of those shmups that it's kind of tragic because it's one of those see, Iori Bradford. It's one of those things where he doesn't have that big meaty hook like a Radiant Silvergun or even a Touhou because of Touhou's visuals and whatever, you know, and bullet hell patterns and everything. Like, it doesn't have a really meaty hook that gets people to go, oh, I need to have the game. I must buy it. I must play it. This is just me showing the leaderboards. I got 3rd. I might go for 1st. But, so it doesn't have that. But as far as the underlying structure, the basics, the level design, the bullet design, the balancing around the elements, the balancing around the power-ups, the amazing ship that is Amy. Like, all that stuff is so good, but it doesn't have that real standout for people. It does for me because I identified with the game quite a bit through the visuals, because when I was playing it, I was realizing, oh, he did the same shit that I did, where he's using RPG sprites and RPG elements. Not only because I love the idea of using RPG designs and stuff in shmups. Like, my dream would be to make a game that kind of looks like a Final Fantasy, like Final Fantasy on Super Nintendo or whatever, but it's a shmup, you know, it's a full-on shmup. There's no RPG mechanics in the slightest. It just looks like a Final Fantasy game, something like that. And this kind of reminds me of like a computer RPG or something. I don't know what it quite reminds me of, but I really liked it. So it caught me for that reason, but I don't think it quite has that same grasping power for as many people, but it's extremely well made. It's extremely affordable. You buy it on itch, you're going to get the Steam version, you're going to get the itch version. It's got online leaderboards. Really, the only thing it's missing is a replay system, you know, but still, you know, it's going above and beyond what a lot of indie shmups do, so I'm not going to hold that against it too much. I don't know if House of Bullets will have a replay system either, but it's great if you can get them in there. So, yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. Please like, subscribe, tell all your friends, and if you haven't, definitely check out Demonizer. Cheer up the developer a little bit, because the game is excellent, and I hope to see a sequel. Maybe not Demonizer 2, maybe it's a totally different game, but you know what I mean? Another shmup from this guy. I don't want it to be one of those tales where the dude makes one shmup and then disappears, which happens so often in the genre. Adios, everyone. So thank you to the $5 patrons: Anthony A, Anthony Iodice, Aaron Solis, Asa Davis, Ben, Orgy22, Brian Shiver, Chris Yusufovich, Chronic Burnout 3, Cook Some Soup, Corey Mark, Des Audio, Darkwing, Darren Griffin, Disco Stas Leia, DJ420, Praise It, Eric H, FCK, Full Set, Retro Schmupper, Hausu, Kiwi, JLab, JBRPG, Gymnacum, John Kelly, Jolts, Gameboy Guru, K, K2, KikoMan589, Larridge, Malaise, Mark Toms, Matthew Derrickes, Maz, Megadeth859, Minong, Nicolin, Michael Stum, Mitch LY, Queen Charlene, Nathaniel Davis, and Electron, Neon Dagger Games, Ookla Googles, Phil Mason, Radocat, Raul, Real Skeen, Riff Mason, Rolf015, Scanline City, 7 Overdose, Shane Sinsienski, Shmup Junkie, Space Fotuus, Stadium Arts, Steve Fiction, Super Snip, The Boot Rex, The Real Ikuzo, The Dirty Screech, The N1, The Old Bensta, TRM, Sugumo, Twilight EX, X20 Spec, and Utakaya. Thanks for watching.